This episode is brought to you by Ardan Labs Education. Sign up today to learn advanced concepts in Go, Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, and more. Visit ardanlabs.com/education for more information.
Welcome to the Ardan Labs Podcast Hour. Special guest today is Brad Peabody. Now, Brad, we've never met, Brad. I've never met you before, but you are you're in the Go community. You're doing a lot with Go. So give everybody like the 2-minute spiel on what Brad Peabody is doing today.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been writing Go code for quite some time. It's definitely my favorite language. At a certain point, like I migrated a bunch of my Java projects and PHP stuff over to that, and it's definitely been the way I like to do things. I did a few years ago. I put together Vugu, which is this Go WebAssembly thing for doing UIs. That was a fun project. I really want to get some more. I want to revive that. But it was an interesting experiment. I still use that on different projects today. So that's kind of the real brief summary. I have some hosting startup stuff I'm working on. It's all written in Go, and and I pretty much every job I do, I'm pretty much that's where most of the work is done. So
So are you an entrepreneur? You're running your own business right now? Are you working for someone? What are you doing?
yeah, so I actually have two different startups that I'm working on, which was probably a mistake, but I've got that going on, and then but I've been doing contract software development. I have like one or two major clients that are kind of my best clients. So I kind of split my time. I do both. I have like a company that I do, even though I'm a contractor. I kind of it goes really well there, and that's kind of my daily stuff. Well, I have my side hustle stuff that I'm trying to get off the ground. So that's kind of
Are these stealth startups, man? Can you tell me a little bit about these
no,
startups?
they're broke startups. You see, that's why you haven't heard about them, right?
They're broke
No,
startups.
no, not entirely. That's not entirely true. I just mean that they don't have a lot of outside funding, right? So, yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I'm working on. I just think. Let's see. I have a couple things. One of it is more of it's a separate Amazon thing. It's not really Go related, so I won't really talk much about that. And also it's the Go stuff is really what excites me. I've been a software engineer, like a long time. I've been programming since I was a kid and that sort of thing. So I just think that from a startup perspective, I think there's a lot of opportunities around the idea of making, full systems that make stuff easier to build. There's a lot of bits and pieces out there, and I think there's really great opportunities for sort of stitching some of these things together to just make the lives of Go developers easier. It's kind of the general concept. And yeah, I don't really have enough put together on it yet to talk about in detail, but
Have you seen Darklang? And we start talking about these types of systems, and it's obviously a new programming language too. But have you seen Darklang?
I've heard of it. I haven't looked in detail. No.
Yeah, it's one of these same sort of platforms where they're trying to do. They give you a language, but the cloud environment's already there. All the components are there. You really just kind of put your app together without thinking about a lot of the technical things that go on behind it, right? Putting all the pieces together in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think also it's tricky because you can't go a few minutes now without hearing about the effects of generative AI and all this stuff, and it's kind of like this figuring out like cool where are things headed moving forward. I'm kind of maybe I'm just old school, but I'm sort of like of the mind that we're still are not anywhere near the replacing this sort of what do individual engineers bring to the table, and it's all about like how do we enable people to do stuff better and faster. I think that's really the way forward. And so yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I don't think that's an unpopular opinion right now. I think anybody that's spent more than 5 minutes actually looking at it at least comes to that same conclusion right now. But I watched this great, I don't remember the name of it, but I can share it with you at some point. This great video where these two guys did almost like a TED talk about where we are today and where it's going. And it was a really scary sort of video, as it relates to like regulation and the government and protecting people. Like really wild video. I gotta almost share this thing with you. Was both amazing and scary at the same time.
See what happens. See where it goes.
We're gonna see what happens. And hopefully, don't world don't. So, like in the video, the guy's like, at some point you might just ask the AI, "I want to be the richest person in the world," and the AI decides the only way to do that is to kill everybody else, right? So it kills everybody. Now you're the richest person in the world because you're the only one left. Like that sort of scary level AI thinking on how it's gonna achieve the goal you've just requested.
Right. Right. Yeah.
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 Whoa, 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 whoa. Brad, this is a podcast about you and sort of your journey to where you are today in 2023. So a couple of initial questions that I ask all the guests, and the first one is, what year did you graduate high school, and what city were you in? So that's a quick one.
Fullerton. What year did I graduate high
Fulton is in
school? Wow.
California.
Fullerton, California. Yeah, it's
Okay,
down there in Orange County. Yeah. What would that have been?
Brad, you're not that old
97.
yet. Come on
Yeah,
now.
sorry, man. I'm gonna go with 97, I think. Yeah.
97. I graduated in 87. Okay, so I got 10 years on you, Brad. Now you're feeling better already. Okay. Now, this question, I need you to just clear your brain, clear your head. Don't want you to think hard. Very first, absolute first memory pops in your head of you working on a computer, your hands on a keyboard.
So my mother, when I was 8 years old, brought home from work a Commodore 64 that was like in some storage closet. And she's like, wow, I think my son would love to mess around with that thing. Can I take this home? And her boss said, sure, whatever, nobody's using it. And I was like, had a tape drive, right? And some, yeah. And I remember going, it was that thing and a manual. I mean, I wasn't even like particularly great at reading, right? But I was, going through.
No, this is like 19. This had to be 1988, dude. This is 88. Like I was
Yeah,
starting
yeah,
university here, and mom comes home with the Commodore. Yeah, you remember that.
yeah. Anyway, it was, and I mean, I was like, it took me forever. I didn't really like learn programming at 8 years old. That's just a little early, but I started. It was introduced to the idea, and it started to warm up to me, and it was this sort of like, at that time, and think about it, the internet. I mean, it was, I don't know, do we even have America Online at that time? It was like literally,
97 is the beginnings of dial-up. Yeah. I saw the internet for the first time in 95. In 1995, somebody showed me this dial-up, and I said, "What are you doing?" Like I had zero even clue the concept, like the semantics of what was happening.
right? What's that boinging noise? What is that? Bing, bing, bing.
And like, what are you
Um,
connected to? What do you what that exists, right? That kind of stuff, right? So 97, I would say. I'm gonna look up when AOL started, but let's see. AOL started in 1985, dude.
Yeah,
85.
there you go.
So
85. Okay. So it had just, yeah, good. So the internet wasn't, it was like just happening. I wasn't aware of it. I was just a kid, but yeah, I was at that point where I was exposed to this concept. I was just in awe about the idea that I could type in a command and the computer would do what I said. And then I could put in another command and then get it to kind of jump from, go to here. It was like basic, right? Go to here. So the fact that it would do these things to me as a kid was just, this was so much cooler than anything else I had going on in my life, right? So yeah, and I just, from there, I just, I never really looked back. I was always interested in programming, but that was my first exposure to a computer.
okay, that's a great memory. So let's move a little bit into now high school. 14, 15, 16, 17, those are formative years. I imagine at that point you've got an upgrade in the house. You have siblings? Was this something that you had to?
I have three half siblings, one that I grew up with, and two that I am in touch with, but I didn't grow up with them.
Yeah, but grow up with. So were they also interested in the computer? Was this something that you had to share at home? Or they didn't care.
No, I was pretty much the big computer user, Yeah.
But I guess by the time you get into high school, right? You graduated in 97, so let's just say 94, 95, 96, 94. Um, I'm sure you've got an upgrade already in the house. You must have a PC or something.
Yeah, we went from we had a Macintosh at one point, one of the early Macintoshes, and then it was I don't remember the evolution of it was after the Apple II. It had an actual GUI, so I think it was like one of the first Macs, and then at a certain point we got an actual PC. I do vividly remember the first PC that I had. I think it was a 286, and it was running. Maybe it was a 386. It might have been a 386, and then it was running Windows 3.1 on it or something like that. And
Oh yeah, the server version. That wasn't. Yeah.
yeah, it was anyway. It had you had DOS, and then you type Windows or whatever it was, and it would run Windows. And I remember trying to install a modem on this thing, and I had this card, and I shut it off, and put the modem in, and I booted it back up, and did whatever commands the thing told me to do, and it didn't work. And I was putting this card in and out, and one time I forgot to shut the machine off, and I put the card in, and that was it. That thing never started again, and I was like, oh man,
I
what am I
mean,
gonna
I'd
do?
done that before, but I never blew the motherboard to pieces.
Yeah, this one actually was also this was from a gift from my parents, right, that I just managed to blow up, and I was like, oh man.
So how do you tell them that do you act dumb? Ma, it's
Uh,
just not turning on anymore.
I think I did it slowly. I was like, yeah, there's some issues I'm working on. You saw me in there connecting this stuff. I'm working on it, and then I think I kind of slowly warmed them up to the idea that this thing was dead. I
Oh
don't
my
remember
God.
exactly, but yeah. But I got
I
a new
mean, the
computer out of
machines
it
were
eventually.
expensive.
Yeah,
They
they
were
were.
expensive back then. It wasn't that machine could have cost you $1,000 or more. It wasn't a joke.
Yeah, exactly. It was, and I didn't fully appreciate the monetary expense of it. I just knew I needed to get a new machine, and always shut the machine off when you're doing hardware work on it.
Now, I said it would like 1,000, and today 1,000 doesn't seem much, but back in the late 90s, 1,000, I don't know what it's equivalent to, but that was a lot of money,
Yeah,
especially for something like that. That wasn't, I don't know what I would have, I guess in my brain, I would equate it to like 5 grand or so. Like if somebody got me my first computer I got in the mid 80s, it was like $1,500. I don't know how my parents ever bought it because we were low middle class, right? Like that equivalent to me is like them having to spend, I don't know, $5,000, $6,000 or something, like in my head. I don't know what the actual numbers are. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of money.
yeah. When the computer you get for your kid is comparable to the cost you paid for the car that you drive to work every day, it kind of tells you something.
What else are you interested in doing during those high school years? You're a musician, you're playing sports.
Sports, I don't know. I was never really good at any of that stuff. I played some sports as a hobby and soccer and stuff like that, but everybody else was way better at me than that. And yeah, hobbies, a similar thing on music. I think I was interested in guitar. I learned a few basics on it, but never really got good at it. To be honest, the only thing I was like really ever like got super deep into was software. At a certain point I learned C, and it was just
Were you taking classes in school, or was everything you went home and that's what you did when you were home?
pretty much self-taught. I didn't have any official classes. I had some trying to remember. Yeah, I didn't really have any official classes. I had a lot of books. My parents they were like, all right, cool, yeah, we can afford some books. That's cool. Just don't break the machine that you got, and we'll
I
be all
get
right with some books. But yeah, so that was most of it was self-taught, and yeah, and I had some friends that were into this stuff as well, but yeah, I mean,
Do you have any funny hacking stories from your high school days, like hacking anything or building something or causing some mayhem?
okay, so I had a story. It ended up just backfiring, but I one time I got a virus. This is back in the day when you had viruses that would go on floppy disks, right? And they were the boot sector was, I think, 512 bytes long, right? Half a K. And it was a carefully written, PC assembly, Intel assembly program that would normally it would try to boot up the machine. In this case, it would copy itself first onto from the floppy to the hard drive, and then once it's set up there, it would try to copy itself back onto the floppy drive. And I got this idea to modify this virus so that it would dial the modem and call a teacher that I really didn't like. And that was just my bright idea, right? I think I was 12 or 13 when this happened. And so I went and I carefully was doing this, right? I don't totally, anyway, I was a kid, right? But I was carefully doing this, and I had this kind of whole thing figured out, and I was in the debug. DOS used to come with a debugger. You could step over the assembly instructions, and I went and I did the wrong thing, and I stepped, instead of trying to step into so I could watch it as it goes and stop it at the right point, I stepped over the function, so it ran the whole function of return. And then it was kind of incomplete. It copied itself to my drive and did it incorrectly and wiped out the boot record of the machine. And so
That's karma.
Yeah, that's karma. And so the virus never left my machine, and my machine was toast. And I was like, oh man. And then I was like, my parents knew enough, like they knew the difference between a machine that booted and didn't. So I was like, oh, I carefully, I was up the whole night reinstalling everything, trying to like remember the positions of the icons in the machine so that, they wouldn't catch wind of my little science project.
Oh my God, dude, that's hilarious. And then you never tried to finish that virus again.
No, I was like, I'm done with this. I learned my lesson.
That's hilarious, man. That would have been classic though.
Yeah.
All right. So then what I'm kind of hearing is that you went through high school not really being too involved in the sports or the music. I have no doubt you had friends. You were hanging out. When you're home, you're sort of hacking on this computer. So I imagine then as you're about to graduate high school and you have to think about the next step in your life, are you thinking university and computer science degrees?
I wasn't. I was just like really eager to keep coding, keep learning. That was kind of my mindset. Also, we didn't. I mean, I didn't grow up poor, but we didn't grow up rich either, right? It was just kind of like, and so the money for college was like not really there, and I was. It's just, I don't know. The idea of staying in school more just was really unappealing to me. So I was like, cool. I want to get a job. I just want to code. I just want to do stuff. I want to learn stuff. This stuff is super fascinating to me. I didn't, have a really strong desire to like make a lot of money. I just wanted to like, cool. I just want to get set up and be able to do stuff that's interesting. And that was really my impetus.
So then what did you do? Because you obviously didn't apply to university. So were your parents on top of you at all when you said I don't want to go to university? Because even in that time frame, that's what successful kids did. I'm putting this in quotes, right? This really sad stigma that if you didn't go to university, you were throwing your life away. So for better or worse, that was the time.
Yeah, man, I didn't know you were going to dig so deep into this. Did you go and get your psychology degree? Yeah. No, no, I don't know. I mean, my parents, yeah, sure. They I don't know. They were kind of very much like, look, do what makes you happy. If as long as you're doing something constructive and you're happy with what you're doing, we're not going to hassle you too much. That was kind of their vibe, right? Like
That's cool. I mean, that's a good attitude. That's the attitude I have to have today with my boys because they're on that same. I don't want to go. I'm done with school, Dad. And I'm like, as long as you're productive, I'm never going to have a problem with what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, in retrospect, it probably would have been smart, to go to college and go that route. But no, I got a job. I had a few different jobs coding on different things. At a certain point,
So how did you get a programming in 1997 with no education beyond self-taught? You got a job writing software.
Yeah, well, so my very first, I don't even know if it was legal to pay me. My very first job that I got was somebody needed there was somebody who at a company who needed a what was it? They were scanning in, there was something that was printed and they needed a database of it. The database didn't exist. So they were like scanning in the pages of this thing and putting it into a little DBase spreadsheet so they could.
They were putting the images in DBase. They weren't trying to do OCR.
No, they were doing OCR. There was OCR software at that time. The problem was it wasn't great, and it would have a lot of like weird. It didn't produce like a thing that you could load cleanly into a database. My first job was I wrote a program in QBasic to go through and clean up that data so that it could be loaded in.
This is when you're in high school.
No, well, what was I? It was junior high, high school, right in that area. I want to say I was 14.
Well, how did you get this job at 14?
Word
Like
of mouth.
through your parents?
Somebody said, "Oh, it was probably my parents saying, oh, my son is this. I don't know what he
Well, for a
does, but he does."
14-year-old, this is not a simple problem, dude. Brad, this is like a real. So, did you solve this problem? Were you able to
Yeah, I got paid for it.
use
Yeah,
Peabody?
they were able to replace like one full-time data entry person went on to a different job because his data entry was essentially replaced with my program.
I thought you were going to say that it was the first time I had somebody fired from automation. So I'm glad you said they got a different job.
No, yeah, that guy was actually a great salesman, and he went on. He did what he did best. Yeah, no, but I didn't get somebody fired when I was 14 from automation. But yeah,
Okay,
so
but so you already had a taste for making money solving problems.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I spent the money on video games. I don't, it was.
But you didn't keep that up. I mean, you didn't get jobs like that throughout high school, did you?
Let's see. No, it was sporadic. I think I did that job. I did another one where I worked for a little bit for a company that was doing calling cards. They had they had payphones back in those days. People didn't have cell phones, so or not many. So it was people would pay
Oh yeah,
for
yeah, yeah. You
calling
can buy
cards.
the calling. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah, and they had a
yeah, yeah.
whole voice, phone switching system, and they needed all kinds of different random things done. So I worked for them for a while. Yeah, just doing different random stuff. A lot of it was the database stuff. They would hire me for.
Okay, but that's during high school. So I guess when you graduate, you feel like I've already been getting paid to do stuff like this. I can get a job.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't very money motivated. I had what I needed, and I don't know. Like I said, I don't really know what I was thinking.
So then what did you do after you graduated high school?
Let's see. I got several more similar jobs. I honestly don't remember the details. One of them was a similar company. I was working on advertising, and I was working on their website.
How did you find these jobs? You were just looking in the classifieds, or you just
Word of mouth. Mostly it was people that I knew, yeah, friends and stuff, like or my parents. Like I don't know, people were kind of pumping me up as this like, oh, this kid like knows all this stuff, and I didn't view myself that way at all. I was like, I'm just interested in this. This stuff is fun for me.
yeah, but you're solving the problems. You're getting hired and you're solving problems. Getting hired.
Yeah, exactly. But to be honest, what ended up happening is I ended up working for several different nonprofits, and I got paid, but it wasn't about the money, and I just spent like years learning stuff and building stuff, and I learned a number of different programming languages, and that's really what I ended up doing. More recently, I was like, okay, cool, I want to do my own stuff. But at the time, it was all about just opportunities to work on cool systems and build stuff, learn programming languages.
So you're living at home. You don't have any real expenses. You're working. You're not in school, which is like a bonus for you. But I imagine that your friends are coming back from university and talking about university, and at some point, 4 years must go by, right? I mean, at some point, you say something like 4 years later, like what happens? You can't be living at home the whole time. You
No, I moved out. I mean, I was married in there for a while.
what?
Life
Time
life
out.
kind
Time
of
out.
life kind of happened.
Time out. Time out.
Going too
Time out.
fast? Okay.
In those 4 years, I want to talk about the 4 years from the time you graduate to wherever you are 4 years later. In between that, you're working for nonprofits. You're telling me it wasn't about the money, so you just took whatever money you had. You were working full time, which was great. You met somebody in between that and got married in between.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
At that point, you do have to move out. At some point, money has to matter. At some point, money.
I made enough to, whatever. I had an apartment, and I had what I needed. It was like, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not even trying. Like at that time in my life, it wasn't what it was. It wasn't what it was about. I was about the experiences, about doing what was interesting, what was fun. Uh, that was really where things were at.
What changes and when? Like, or that's it. We're gonna just say you worked for some company now for the next right now. We're talking like 2002, right? That's 4 years later, 2002. That's still right. We're in 20. There's still 20 years to talk about um, from that sort of point on. So you're kind of doing these side jobs, or you're just working with a bunch of little companies. I guess you're still an entrepreneur in that sense.
Yeah, I wasn't. I mean, at the time, I wasn't into my own company. That came later, right? That came. That's more of a more recent thing, like relative to that. You know what I mean? But yeah, um, yeah, man. I don't know. Like I said, it was a different time, different perspective. Yeah. I mean, I don't really want to get too deep into the nonprofit details, but it was interesting, and also technically, aside from the causes that I was supporting there, the technically, it was very cool. I mean, how often do you get plugged into a position, and then now there you are, you have access to a router that's got the BGP table, being pushed out from, and you're like connected to the internet for real, you know what I mean? And being able to manage, racks and racks of servers, and and build stuff in a bunch of different languages, and and I got to the point where I was, managing other people doing this sort of stuff, and so yeah, I mean, it's that was really, I don't know, the experience was fun. I wasn't super in.
How long were you with that nonprofit, building up your basically your tech resume?
Man, I don't know. It probably was 20 years. I don't remember the exact, like, off the top of my head, like when I did different things.
You were there a long time. I mean, you take this job out of high school and you're there for a decade.
There was a couple different things that I did. I did switch between a few different projects and things. But sure, yeah, I was on that track of like, I'm not worried about making money. I'm just gonna do what's interesting, and build stuff up.
That's mind blowing, dude. You're just happy being there. You got to play with a bunch of tech, and that held your interest enough. You never got bored. You always were able to work on the next new thing.
Yeah, there was plenty to do. Yeah, there was plenty to do. That was not really an issue. I'm always like, whatever I do, wherever I go, I'm always like, I'll originate new stuff. Depending on what kind of boss I have at different times. This is sometimes appreciated, sometimes not. But like, I'll be like, cool, we need to build something for this, or we should come up with a better solution to this problem. So I'm always kind of in that problem solving mode. That's just kind of how I'm wired. So yeah.
What finally gets you to decide that it's time for a change being there? And what year are we talking when you move on from this?
I think I started doing entrepreneur stuff more seriously in 2016, right? So, and that's kind of like you know, at that point I was like, good, I'm gonna go ahead, and I like, at that point I just was, changing everything up. I'm like, look, I'm gonna go ahead, and I can feel like I can do all kinds of business stuff, and be successful in my own business, or partners with somebody else or whatever. So I was kind of searching around for things to do. At that point, I kind of started I started another business with a friend of mine, and it was the first business where I'd ever like. There's a huge difference between, like, I didn't know anything about starting a business, right? I knew all this stuff about technology, and even how to like manage other developers, but all the other aspects of it were just not something I was familiar with. So when I went to go start my own business with a friend of mine, um, yeah, I mean, that business is still alive. It went through some ups and downs. It kind of barely survived, but it was like kind of my initial introduction to like, what does it take to be an entrepreneur?
What was that business? Was it going to be like consulting?
So okay, well, so I always kept my feelers out for people who just wanted me to make stuff. That's fine. I always have that, right? And I still to this day, there's a company that does a bunch of work in GPS trackers and a platform for that, and so I still do work with them, and it's great. And it's a friend of mine runs the company, and so they, I've always, they're like, hey, can you help us build this or help? We have some new guys in the team. Want you to help make sure that they're all up to speed. So there's that. That's kind of always going on the side, right? And then my whatchamacallit, my other business with my friend, it was like, okay, we want to start this thing, and an Amazon seller, and he had kind of these ideas of how to cater to Amazon sellers, and that company is Samurai Seller. It's there, it's rolling. We've kind of rebooted it a couple times to try to really get it picked up, but it was very much like okay, cool, this is okay, welcome to the real experience of like now not just being a developer, but being an entrepreneur and dealing with all the different things that come along with that. You know what I mean? And
But that's in 2016. You decide that you're going to build a product to help people who are selling on Amazon do that more efficiently. Is it with the barcoding and all that kind of stuff?
yeah, it was more in the advertising space because if you, I don't know how much you do or don't know about Amazon selling, but a good chunk of your money goes to Amazon to buy ad space from them, right? And so Google AdWords, they have advertising for that. Well, you have Amazon has the same thing on their platform. So managing that expense and optimizing that is a big deal for Amazon sellers. So
But you didn't have any experience with that. Your business partner did.
exactly. I was the tech guy because that's how he we knew each other. He knew me as I'm the tech guy who can program stuff, and was the Amazon seller guy who knew how to get things sold and what sellers need, that sort of thing.
How long did it take you to build enough of the product where people could start using it?
Well, it went in stages, right? I mean, it took, I don't know, we spent, I don't know, between, I want to say 4 to 6 months or whatever, getting some initial stuff put together. Because it was really just me at that time and part time, right? Just kind of putting stuff together. And then we got something put together. There were some, you know, some Amazon has their terms of service, right, and whatever. So there were some issues with with how some of the data was being collected, and so that got shut down, right? So we learned the hard way, like, okay, yeah, we need to make sure that we're fully compliant and everything like that. So that was
You had to actually read one of those documents that nobody reads.
unfortunately, yes, exactly, yeah. And then we're like, oh, actually, yeah, okay, they told us we can't do this, and yeah, it's true, it does say that. Who would have thought? But whatever. So that got shut down, and then we came up with a new product, right? And so we kind of like, it's been an interesting thing of kind of trying to figure out what it is. It really, it's one of these things where as an engineer, you see a problem and you, like, at least for me, like the way I look at it, I see a problem. I'm like, wow, I can think of this cool solution. What if there was something that did it this way and this way? And all this work here you wouldn't have to do, and it can enable you to do these other things. And that's kind of like how I think as a, like, or whatever. That's just a general mode I kind of get into a lot of the times. And then you sort of go and talk to other people, and they're like, dude, what is wrong with you? Nobody wants that, right? Only you want that, Brad. You're the only person in the world who thinks like that. And so this sort of like this thing of like, okay, good. How do you take your ideas and sort of like, okay, good. What test them against the reality of what other people want? What are they? I mean, really, what are they going to pay for, right? It's
I find it interesting because I have tried to solve other people's problems before, and it's just never worked out. I feel like if you don't have that problem, for me, there are people who are talented enough to do this. But if I don't have the problem and I'm not trying to solve it for myself, um, I'm always going to go down the wrong path because, like you just said, Brad, you're the only one who thinks they have this problem. That's not the problem I have, right? You're solving the wrong problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and finding a problem that a number of people have and that can be solved with a certain amount of resources. That's the other thing as a developer, you go, man, you have there's this sort of like, man, with enough, if I can just kind of get myself focused, get myself in the zone long enough, I can solve all kinds of problems. And then you start to realize that long enough can be quite long when you're when you're building a larger project, and you start going, okay, well, wait a minute, uh, is this really going to be something where it's going to pay off? So yeah.
Yeah, but to be fair, you didn't go full time on this. You still working part time, right? You're still doing other things. You're placing a bunch of chips all over the table instead of just pushing your chips in one place.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, that's another thing, is just, do you want to go all in on a startup? I mean, I have, the thing is, I have enough of other, jobs and income and stuff where I can live comfortably at now, and I'm like, it's just, now money's, not an issue at the moment. It's like, okay, good. And so I'm trying to like figure out how to balance all this stuff so that I can build the other startup that I want. And then if that takes off, then great, but at the same time, I don't want to, I've seen and read and whatever else. There's just so many startups that, like, yes, I understand the point of you have to go all in, but you can also go all in and then go down with the ship, right? And so, I just did. It wasn't not the experience that I wanted to have. So I chose to do it a different way. I mean, we'll see if something takes off, and I can. There's a few things I got on the works that we'll see how it goes, and uh, uh, I like to think I'm getting better and better at this entrepreneur thing. So we'll see what happens.
So I read an article one time that said, don't ever say you don't have time for something, because that's never true. You have time for all the things that you want to do. It's about not having attention for something, right?
Okay.
And so I want to kind of throw that at you, because the way you're operating right now is you've got to put your attention towards, I don't even know how many things right now, 3, 4, sort of 5 things at a time, and you got to balance your attention appropriately, right? And to balance it in a way where you feel like you're being productive on all of those things. So I'm just kind of curious. Do you ever catch yourself realizing you're spending a little bit more time here because that's what you're really sort of interested in, and these things are starting to fall apart because you're not? And does that add extra stress to your life trying to juggle those 5 balls?
Yeah, absolutely it does. I mean, and honestly, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm trying to refocus everything so that, I can kind of get it, cohesed. At a certain point, as an entrepreneur, you definitely go like, okay, good. It doesn't matter how good of a programmer I think I am. I need to have other people involved. I need to be able to delegate. I need to be able to, do what I'm good at, but also enable other people to do work on important parts, and also, yeah, focus my attention on, the things that matter. Not everything, there's a lot of things that are important. They're not all equally important. You have to, there's only so many hours a day, so you have to make decisions. So yeah, I think I did make the mistake of sort of going a little too broad and getting my fingers in too many pies. But that's kind of the goal right now, is to have, if I have an umbrella startup where I can reel all this stuff in, it can also help. I can revive Vugu and have that, going again, unless something better comes along and it can get merged into that project, then great. I'm not so in love with my own idea that I'm not open to other things. I just love the idea of having a programming a setup where you can write the UI and the backend in the same language. I just think it's such a better way to work, But anyway, but yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and that's really the game, is to figure out how to reorganize that stuff,
And you said something else, like, I got to learn how to almost let go and bring other people on to do some of the technical stuff that you want to do, right? I mean, that's the only way. Find people you trust, but you got to pay them too. So that's the
I noticed that
entrepreneurial
part. I
pieces.
noticed that they asked me for money. Yes.
They ask for money. It's got to come from somewhere. So you got to have revenue, or either raising or revenue. Have you done anything around raising, or have you done everything where you're just trying to maintain cash flow?
Not much. I haven't seriously gone and like, okay, good, start, pounding down doors on in Silicon Valley and stuff. I haven't gotten into that. I really want to get myself into a position where I feel better about it. I actually I think, yeah, I'm just trying to tune the idea, and get as much done as I can with the resources I have. and also really kind of that initial customer, customer feedback where I actually have a flow of customers to prove the idea, to make sure that I'm on the right track, and as much external evidence that I have that I'm on the right track at that point, then it would make more sense to take funding more seriously. But I feel like I've just heard so many stories about people who have an idea, ask for a bunch of money, it's all well intended, but they get in over their heads. And then the thing that kills the company is the fact that they have to keep that pace going, and they can't sustain it. You know what I mean? The burn is too much. You get too many employees, and it's like, and then what? You got to fire your friends. It's terrible, right? Like, I'm like, I definitely don't want to be in that position. So that's kind of my thought on that.
I want to switch to a technical conversation on something you said, but I want to just finish this a little bit. My first business failed because we bled to death, because we raised some money and didn't raise more money. And so you can have the opposite problem as well, which is you don't infuse enough cash in the beginning or at the right time, and you're dead. You lived, but you're bleeding to death. And that's the opposite side of what you're talking about. And so I almost want to ask you, with all the things you have in motion, and you don't have to say which one it is, but there's got to be one of these that you really believe in, like heart and soul. You really believe in that idea. And then I'm wondering, if that's the thing that you really believe in, why not go? Why not take? You got to take risks, right? No risk, no reward. The bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. But at the same time, right? Um, you don't want to live a life where you look back and everything was just even, right? That's not a life lived. You need to have the biggest highs. You got to have really deep lows. And so I just start to wonder, Brad, a little bit, like at some point, why not just, even if it's going to be the biggest low in your life, it could be end up being the biggest high in your life. Why not just go all in on that one thing that you really, 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 truly believe in, and do everything you can to make that happen?
And the answer is, you're probably right. That is pretty much, what where this kind of thing is headed. Like I said, I'm not really ready to like talk too much about the idea, because I just want to kind of hammer out more of the pieces. But yeah, I mean, that you're right. I don't disagree. And also, I mean, hey, the Y Combinator guys, they say, like, if you want our money, you're gonna have to just be on this full time. Which,
No, you got to be 100%, 110% hedged down. Nothing else in your life exists. Yeah.
yeah, so that is where it's going. I mean, I think, I mean, Samurai Seller is actually a going concern. We've got people doing the work. I don't. That's, to me, is, there's a lot of good things that are happening that I don't have to have my attention on, whatever. So I'm less worried about that. I'm more worried about, like, this other startup, which is, more developer. That means Samurai is, that's just, I did it with my friend because I thought it'd be a good idea, and he was super into it and whatever, right? But my other stuff is based around, Go development, and hosting, and that sort of thing. So, and just getting stuff made.
Yeah, at some point, man, you gotta walk on the lake and see if you can walk on water, because because it
Yeah.
just doesn't. Okay, I want to have a technical. You said something that's super interesting to me, and I had a conversation earlier today with one of my. Actually, one of the guys that work for me. It's actually Kevin, who you met before we started. He's going to school right now. He's finishing up his undergraduate degree, and he's taking a class learning Swift. And I said to him, um, what's kind of interesting about Swift is you can build your front end with it, but I know a lot of people inside of Apple are using it to build the back end. It's one of these languages that lets you sort of do both, though I don't know anybody outside of Apple that's using Swift to build back end APIs, but I know they're doing it inside of Apple. And Node is one of these other sort of languages where, honestly, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but there are days where I wake up and I think, what drugs was somebody on when they thought it was a good idea to run JavaScript in the back? But then I go back to that idea that, well, it's the same person who was doing JavaScript in the front who needed to do back end. And it makes sense. They don't have to learn another language. And so you made a comment about liking a language that lets you code both the front end and the back end. I find that super interesting. So, what are your favorite languages for doing? Is it Swift? Is Swift your sort of front end, back end? You're the first person out at Apple that I've met that does that, or what language?
No, I want to do it. I want to do it with Go, which is what the intention behind Vugu was. So here, I totally agree with what you're saying. So here's the thing, right? Yeah, JavaScript. I know they have TypeScript, so they're trying to handle the type safety thing, right? Like I get it, but I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to go and.
Have you heard of Fine? Let me just jump here. Fyne. Have you heard of Fine?
I've heard of it. Isn't that for desktop stuff though? Like it's more of a like a widget library.
I I think no, it's for desktop, mobile, and web.
Okay.
It's for
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
The other project is a guy coming out of New Zealand, but Fine is the first one, just because I was at GopherCon UK and I met the guys that are developing this. But that stuff is out there, right? That's what you're trying to do. You want to do both.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I haven't done, I mean, I was super into Vugu a couple of years ago and it's, I haven't been super into it recently. But yeah, so I mean, but yeah, and like I said, I'm not even super stuck on like my idea. It's more just that concept of like I think there is a huge amount of productivity to be gained from being able to seamlessly move from one to the other. And you're right, that is what this. Okay, good. If some people in Apple are doing Swift on the front end and back end, I can understand why. I understand the draw of wanting to use JavaScript or one language, on the front end and the back end. It's just that JavaScript is not a really. I mean, again, I don't want to like sit here and rag on JavaScript. It's not really my point, but I don't consider it to be a very well designed language. And I think there's a lot of people that share that opinion. I've written a fair amount of code in JavaScript, and between the type safety, the module system, and the sort of like the duck typing kind of concept there. It's like the larger your project is, the more you want the compiler to help you, the compiler and the tool chain to help you keep things organized, right? If you've ever tried to like debug a problem in like a really large Python program, for example, it's brutal because you don't have all of the, I don't know, maybe it's gotten better these days, but the fact that you don't have a really well defined thing, you've got this variable that comes in and it could be any type, and you've got this field, and you don't really know where that field's coming from. Those things I think are, again, at small scale are not a big deal, but as you try to build a larger and larger project, they really get in your way. And so I really like a lot of the design decisions that went into the Go programming language. And I'm like, okay, cool. I would like to see this being used more front end and back end. And when WebAssembly was, came out, I mean, it's been had some progress. It seems like it's slowed a little bit, which is a little unfortunate. Maybe I'm just out of the loop. It's possible too. But but that was a huge thing, WebAssembly coming out, and the fact that you can run Go in the browser. I think that its support has also improved, but could be better. I think the binaries are still a little large.
One, I want to save my hide. So the other project is Wales, Wails. I think these are the two big projects right now. Fine, Fyne, and Wales. And Fine is getting a lot of corporate support. The team that's working on that is it's part-time work, but their company's paying for that. And I think they're going to end up having the tooling that you really need to do front end dev. So anybody's looking at this going, oh yeah, I want to do front end and Go. I think you got to look at Fine and sort of Wales today. As it relates to WebAssembly, this is where now I think the latest version in 121 they added support for WASI, which is the WebAssembly APIs for accessing, say, disk, OS, system calls, that sort of stuff. So that's in the core Go compiler. But TinyGo is really where big strides have been made for the WebAssembly, and I think that's where it's going to end up staying, because that's the TinyGo that's really being designed for the microcontrollers and the smaller machines and for that kind of stuff. So huge development efforts are being done in the Go community, one by the Go team, like we just saw with Wazzy, and by the community with the TinyGo compiler.
I agree. It's actually interesting that you mentioned TinyGo, because I actually have done some. I have a pet project. It's not just mine, but like a company hired me to do on this to do some microcontroller work with TinyGo, and I got to tell you, I love it. Especially compared to trying to write all that code in C. It's a little interesting because you're on a microcontroller and you're very size constrained on everything, right? And you got to think about the bits and bytes a lot more than you do. And you can't just say, "Oh, the garbage collector will take care of this," right? So, but yeah, it's a really cool tool. My only gripe with TinyGo is the size and the fact that it's like you have to install it with you have to like build it with LLVM and stuff. But it's not bad. It does work well. It's generally once you get it installed, it's a really awesome tool, and I agree. So yeah, and I think we've actually done some Vugu stuff with TinyGo. It does function okay, but yeah, like I said, I haven't been super deep into that recently.
And if I'm doing something super small from a UI perspective, browser based mostly, not mobile, then the Go templating system is fine for me. And writing that out. I'm fortunate enough that my wife is turning into a front end guru. And all the front ends today are like, for that stuff is all JavaScript Node, right? Which I have no desire to learn it, but she's really good at it. So I've never had an issue with the front end tech. And I put them in the same project, by the way, but I have no issues with the front end tech being Node, JavaScript, and all the back end APIs being Go. But I think to your point, I'm getting help on the front end. I'm not the one doing the front end. I have another team member doing that, and you don't have that. And so I guess in those particular cases, it's just better to have everything in that one language.
Yeah, and I wonder about like, okay, good. So some of these people that are learning, JavaScript is a really good, straightforward place to learn to make things work in the browser, and it has that benefit, right? You can just like, you can almost like make an HTML page in your desktop and throw some JS in and double click it, and it's like boom. That I think is between that and the accessibility of it and how much information is out there, it makes it really easy to get started in JavaScript. And I wonder though also if there were if the tooling improves on the Go side of things, like what is to keep someone who's learning to program for the first time from making Go their first language? Like I think it's mostly just what people.
It's a university problem. I'm going to tell you what it is. It's a university problem. And what happens because I have I don't know if you know Todd McLeod. He's from the university side. He's a Go trainer, incredibly good. We talked one day about how do we get universities to teach Go, and it came down to, well, Bill, you've got to have a curriculum that is certified, and you need a book, and you can't just take the books we write today. It has to be a academically college oriented sort of book, and most of the professors write the book for their classes because that's how they supplement their income. And so it's not even enough for you to write the book because most likely that professor's not going to use that book. They want their own book. And we saw after the 90s this whole movement of CS 101 going to Java, right? And all of that. And that's still your first. When I went to university, it was Pascal. You started with Pascal. Now you're starting with Java. So I think it really starts at the university level where the universities and the professors have decided they don't want to teach object-oriented programming day one. They want to teach Go. But it's a hill to climb. It's a big hill to climb.
Because that's a lot of people's first exposure. There is kind of where that comes from.
It is. It's their first back in at least back in my day in the late 80s, your first exposure was basic because when that computer came into the house, that's what was there. And then you had to make a conscious decision to then decide to learn C, let's say, or something else, because you read enough and you educated yourself enough. Well, then you ended up going to university. Like I saw Visual Basic at some point. It didn't get me excited, um, but you see what I'm saying. And so the effort is there. Now I've talked to Todd. I said, Todd, let's sit down and let's build a book and Todd would know what that book would have to look like for the academic use. But then again, it comes back to, yeah, Bill, but now you got to convince some professor to decide to use that book. And why would they walk away from their extra income with a book that they most likely have?
So we need to get a bunch of CS professors together and get them to co-author a book and share the proceeds with them. Is that the strategy?
You got to do something there. That's really where it starts. And I think Go can be a great first language because it hides all of the machine, and then you can open the door to the machine, which is kind of the way I teach it, right? But you can hide it and just learn it as if it's like basic in terms of syntax and semantics. And then when it comes time, you can open the door up and go, this is how cache lines work and branch prediction, and see it all actually happen and have an effect, because you don't have a virtual machine in between. It's you and the machine, right? With the runtime providing facility, but not creating a layer of abstraction. So it can be, um, but that's going to require effort from people that are in academia, and I don't see it just yet. Like MIT's got some classes. I think Stanford has some classes. They're higher end classes. They're not the 101 classes. And Todd McLeod was at Fresno State teaching it as well. Okay, so I'm not saying it isn't happening, but it's not mainstream. It's not 101.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you think so many people get into JavaScript on the front end as their, I guess it's just, I can only assume it's just because it's so accessible and so obvious. You Google anything, building a web front end, and you're going to end up with React and maybe Vue or Angular or something. But
It's because of the visual component. If you're first learning a programming language, you need the visual component. When I first started learning BASIC, one of the first things I did was learn how to use the ASCII character set to draw boxes and shapes and do things, because you needed a visual component to it, right? Even BASIC on these,
you can see it work, right? You see the output.
you need to see something other than a number and a print statement. And so the coding schools are out there teaching web, because it adds that that visual component. There are languages. Microsoft had a cool one around a frog or something that lets you do. You need that some form or another, especially if you're not in university where it doesn't matter. The visual component, and what better visual tool than the browser? Plus, I don't think people realize that your TVs are basically browsers right now. Your cars are running browsers right now. I think Elon Musk's spaceship is all running JavaScript inside.
That is a scary thought,
right? But it's not scary because browser technology has gotten really solid, and languages like TypeScript have made that really and resistant to things, right? And so I don't know if it's scary. It's not necessarily the parts that are driving the spaceship. It's the visual components of it all. But it's the most accessible UI that we have today. And yeah, it's crazy that JavaScript's driving it, but that's where we are, right? So
no, I agree. I agree. So unfortunate, I would add, but reality is the way things work. I get it. Yeah.
but what would have been the alternative? Electron and everybody learning that? Or I just feel like we could say it's unfortunate because we've all had our not a number error here and there. I almost feel like it was just that was the progression, that was the evolution that was going to happen at some form or another.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think there's an argument for just HTML and CSS as, and they've kind of evolved over time, and there's some like legacy things in there that are kind of funky. But I would say as a user interface, that's got to be the most developed. And I mean, I get it, the different OS vendors have their own thing, and you've obviously got X1X and GNOME and KDE, and you got all these different things. But just think about just the sheer number of web applications and how far HTML and CSS come and how much code actually runs on those. Yeah, I would say that the browser, again, and this is just me shooting from the hip, but it seems like it's the most developed user interface environment
It
in the
is,
world. Like,
with
it's
the
just,
tooling that's there. Outside of the mobile apps, right? We tried it on the mobile apps. You need more native support there. And we've consolidated down to basically 3 browsers at this point because Microsoft is using Chromium. Look, I have a friend at Google who works on the Chrome team, and one of his big jobs is managing all of the machines they have that run the test suites. Dude, they have tests, okay, where the next update to Chrome, they're checking pixels on certain web pages. Did that pixel move? Did something change in the rendering engine to the point where that pixel is now moved to a left or the right? Like, that's the level of testing, at least in Google, that's happening on these browsers.
yeah, good. I mean, that's what you need on something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the quality control is incredibly, at least there. And I imagine that Apple's doing the same thing for Safari, and now again Microsoft is using Chromium, and you have the Firefox. I imagine all those things are happening.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, so that part of it makes a lot of sense to me in terms of HTML and CSS. But I would also just, with WebAssembly, it would be nice if we saw more languages. The sort of like a lot of the features that are available in the browser don't have to be called as JavaScript functions. I mean, I guess they do right now, but there's no fundamental reason why you need to call create element with it has to be JavaScript. Like, it could be an API that you call from any language, for example. I mean, it's not right now, but it would.
Well, you have a backwards compatibility problem now that you have to maintain. But beyond that, I don't know enough. I'm not in the space. So if somebody's listening to this, send me all the emails you want. But WebAssembly was promised as the engine to make the browser run faster. That never took off, right? Like, WebAssembly is being used in embedded systems and smaller systems. Maybe it ends up being the next runtime, language, but it never really took off in terms of the browser. I don't know why, other than you're okay with something taking a half a second or a quarter second in the browser because your brain and your fingers don't move that fast anyway. And so, as long as a page downloads and you feel comfortable that it did it fast enough, you're never going to worry about making it faster. The user won't even experience faster. So, do you need to spend do we need to spend engineering time and effort making the browser faster, or do we want to spend engineering time and effort making the networks faster, which is the real cost of anything being slow, and the backend systems faster, and our database is faster? And right, like, if you had the choice, you got to put your money somewhere. Where are you going to put it?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And to be fair, the V8 engine people have done an amazing job. I mean, the fact that they're able to take a dynamic language like that and just in time compile it and make it run at near native speeds is impressive. And I think that's a big part of you know the big part of the success of JavaScript. Um, but yeah, well, I guess for me, it's not so much about the making it faster, although I realize that was a stated benefit that kind of didn't. I agree, it didn't entirely materialize. Maybe for like games or something where you have like really super intensive stuff. But again, you can actually write JavaScript that runs almost as fast as long as you take the just-in-time stuff into account and don't do anything too dynamic. It'll sort of compile a bunch of that, optimize a bunch of that stuff away anyway. But making it accessible to other languages, so that you basically don't have to write. You don't have to deal with JavaScript or TypeScript, and you can write in a language that the rest of your team actually works in, right? And then when you send data back and forth between the user interface and the backend, it's the same structure on both things. If you add a field, it just magically appears in both places, right? Some of those things I think are the benefits that are more appealing to me.
Here's where that breaks down. And Elm was one of these languages that promised a lot of that, right? Elm was a language where you'd write your HTML and all this stuff. I think it breaks, for me, it breaks down the moment I have to debug something, because I'm not debugging inside VS Code inside of Go. I'm now inspecting the browser where the transpiled JavaScript is now running. I find the JavaScript that failed, and if I have to translate that back to where that was in the Go side, like, you need that tooling. And so I don't see, and I could be wrong with the limited experience I have, I don't see how you escape having now I don't know how the TypeScript developers do it, to be honest with you, but I don't know how you escape the JavaScript side of things. I don't know enough. I'd love somebody to write me in and say, because if you're writing TypeScript, right? I don't think that's running in the browser. JavaScript's running in the browser. I don't know how you translate that back.
Well, even if you write JavaScript, that's not the JavaScript you wrote is not exactly what's running in the browser. It's going through a transpiler, and they're doing backward compatible fixes on it and bundling it. So, but usually what will happen is you write some stuff, they'll bundle it, and then if you get an error, you'll get a stack trace where they've used the map file or whatever, convert it back to the line numbers from the original thing. But you get that in Go too. But anyway.
You do, but for me, front end developers are more hardcore than back end developers. I don't care what anybody says. Somehow we've, as an industry, have put the back end developers as if they're smarter, more experienced, better. And I'm sorry, bro, but I think front end development is 10 times harder. Event driven systems are 10 times harder, I think, to build mental models around. The front end systems are multiple languages, debugging, the whole, like, it's mind blowing, bro. Mind blowing to me, the complexity there.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I tend to, I find that it's easier to come up with a good pattern on back end code, and that a lot of times your assumptions about patterns in the UI tend to be broken by user expectations. Somebody comes in and says, well, it really, if you just think about it as a human, it really should work this way. And you're like, oh man, there goes my design that I put together, like my tech design, not visual, right? But like literally, I was planning on these two things being the same, but I really need two different things now because of the comment somebody made on my UI. So I find that tends to happen more often on UI code than backend code. I mean, certain parts of backend code are still really hard, but I do see where you're coming from. But isn't an
yeah, go
argument
on.
that, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, isn't that an argument that we then therefore we want a better front end programming language? If it's a harder problem, don't we deserve to not have to write JavaScript in the front end? I'm just throwing the
I'm going
idea
to go
out there.
back to what I said, and it's what makes Go amazing. You have a backwards compatibility problem that nobody maybe necessarily thought about in the beginning. And so you got too much of it out there. You have to support it. It has to be there. And replacing it, I think TypeScript maybe has come the closest to developer productivity while replacing it, right? I don't know. Do we want to spend engineering effort there? Right now, if Go gets good enough support for transpiling and or WASM and support meaning debugging, then I think people will do it. And the more people that do it, the tooling will get better. I would argue to anybody listening to this, if you're really passionate about this conversation and wanting to use, say, Go on the front end, I would want you to contribute to the Fine or the Whales projects. There are already years in this. They're the same passionate people who want what you're talking about. Instead of building another one of these, I would say rally around one of these two technologies and get us there. I'd love nothing more than to write the front ends and Go and to do everything. I just know that we're not there yet. And for the people that I will work with, they're proficient in Node and some whether it's React, Vue, I don't even remember Angular, whatever it is, right? All right, do what you got to do. I don't want to slow you down.
I agree. It's all about the tooling and what's and how's what are people used to, and and I understand it's is the improvement big enough to warrant the effort? Is a very relevant question. So
All right, man, we are just about out of time, but I want to kind of get back into sort of your thing. So right now you are essentially got a few balls in the air. You're doing your consulting to bring cash in. You've got a few product ideas that you're working out. You've got a bunch of things going on. One of the things that was popping in my head as we were talking, I just want to kind of explore this a little bit. Um, I, how are you marketing yourself? How are people finding you for this client work? Because I meet people who say, "Bill, I want to go off on my own. I don't know how to get that first sort of gig, right?" Um, how are you marketing yourself? Is it just 20 years and it's viral at this point and people know, or how are you letting people know you exist? How are you getting in the conversation?
Uh, I wish I had a better answer for you on that, but honestly, it's mostly through people that I've just met, and the opportunity just made sense just from talking to people about things that they need. One of them was just an old friend of mine, and he had a company he was starting up, and he's like, "Oh man, I need some work done on building some of this system," and so like I said, I wish I had a more repeatable piece of advice to give you. I wrote a few articles um, back, which promoted me in various ways, but I haven't really. Again, most of my promotional concept is all geared toward like, okay, good. How do I start getting first customers for this startup? That's kind of where my attention is. So yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you as advice for other people.
But are you going to meetups? You going to conferences? Are you doing any of that?
Sometimes, I used to go to DEF CON, which is not Go specific, but it's always fun. It's the only conference I've seen where people drink on stage, so that's kind of an interesting experience. But yeah, so I'll go to them sporadically, but I find myself, like you're saying, between these different things, I find myself kind of splattered, to be totally honest. But that's why it's I'm trying to narrow things down. But yeah, it's mostly for me. It's mostly been personal contact, word of mouth, people I know, that's that sort of thing, and just when I get into it, I don't. I probably should do a lot better on that in terms of promoting myself and to communicating about my ideas better and that sort of thing. Again, I hope to be able to do that more once I have a bit more of a focused startup. I can kind of go, okay, good. I'm gonna spend more time writing articles to communicate this idea, get the feedback, listen to what people say, and tune it and tweak it. I feel like that will be a good opportunity for that.
All right, Brad. Well, when you finally hold your breath and jump in the pool, head below the water, when you push those chips all the way in, I need you to just send me an email. Say, Bill, I'm freaking out. I'm playing this pot to the end. I want to hear that you've done that, and I want to be your biggest cheerleader.
I appreciate it. I will definitely let you know. Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate everything you do. I've seen you around in the community on the Slack and stuff, and I think what you do is really terrific. Like I said, and any promoting programming to other people, and learning how to do things better, and all that stuff is really exciting to me, and I think a positive thing just in general for the world. So
Yeah, I appreciate it. All right, man. All right. This is Brad Peabody and Bill Kennedy signing off from the Ardan Labs podcast. And I hope to see everybody again real soon.